Avi, we're recording. How you doing, mate?
Good. How are you, mate?
Very
How are you,
good.
Lauren?
Oh, very good, thank you.
This is you're on the other side of the mic today. You're usually hosting your own show,
Yes, I am. Yeah, and
which
and I'm on video.
which you should chill.
Yes, it's Pleb Radio. It's a Nosta Nest. Usually record live on Nosta, which is Nosta Nest. For folks who don't know, is the Nosta equivalent of Twitter Spaces. A lot better because you can actually zap people there, and there's a live chat you could participate in. So yeah, it's Pleb Radio. I do it with my co-host every Friday and out on Fountain either the same day or the day after.
Awesome. I've not listened to a Nosta Nest yet.
You should.
Yeah, I'm spending more time there these days and I'm getting better engagement. I would say more and better. So more likes, replies, comments, and boosts, and better replies than Twitter, and with half the amount of followers. So it's clearly flipping.
It's a much happier place, and I think that just makes all the difference. The lack of an algorithm to manipulate is to manipulate folks' attention, right? It's and with the Twitter algorithm, you have people trying to game that, and it becomes this. There's this influencer simp dynamic that Twitter promotes, the algorithm promotes, people constantly trying to dunk for likes
Mm.
and retweets and ratios. And you don't get that on Nostr, right? It's just a stream of consciousness, it's the chronological feed. And that, I've been pretty active for almost 2 years now. And I find people so much happier.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. Somebody, who was it? Neil Jacobs tweeted earlier something along the lines of, what's hindering Bitcoin adoption? Is it the tech? Is it this? Is it that? And I retweeted that tweet and just it's the algos. And, I swear it is
Yeah.
because the algos just, once they've figured you out, they're not there to feed you what you want to hear. They're there to feed you what is going to trigger you. Because if you're triggered, you're more likely to respond or post or get outraged and write something. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a much dirtier place than it used to be when I first found like Bitcoin Twitter, for example. Yeah, that was a weird place, but it was a fun place, and there was a lot of. I mean, my education. I owe so much to Twitter for my education, but I hope people now listening to these podcasts are at least trying Nosta. And if they're very brand new to the rabbit hole, just go straight there and find the Bitcoiners. And because it's pretty much, I mean, there are a lot of other people. Obviously, it's not just Bitcoin only, but it's very much dominated, I would say, by Bitcoiners first.
Yeah.
Uh, that's just slowly seeping out. But that's just my opinion. You've been using it. You're much more of a power user than I am. Does that sound like a fair assessment so far?
Yeah. It is a lot of Bitcoiners, but that is changing. Um, I think it's something like 50,000 weekly active users. Um, and that number's ticked up a little bit over the last couple of months. I mean, the Telegram CEO's arrest for some reason led to an uptick. The situation in Brazil with X being banned led to that uptick. So we're seeing a slightly more, I wouldn't say an entirely more diverse user base, but a slightly more diverse user base these days. Yeah.
Hmm. All right, Lauren, fire away with your question.
Why did you write a fiction book?
Well, I love fiction. Uh, and most of the books I've read, honestly, until I became a Bitcoiner, were fiction books. I grew up and when I was your age, Lauren, I was reading during the summer holidays, I'd read 2 to 3 books a day, right? And certainly was averaging at least, 500 books a year for the most part. And they were entirely fiction. Um, and then at some point, got into college and just reading fell off a cliff for the most part. Uh, I'd read a little bit of fiction on and off even then, but the first time I really started reading nonfiction was when I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I said, okay, I need to actually start figure out what this thing is. And that's all it's been. And then when I reached a point when I said, how can I contribute back to Bitcoin? What can I give? And I've loved telling stories, not just reading stories. I knew the nonfiction market in Bitcoin was fairly saturated, right? It's almost, it felt like when I was thinking about what I could write about, uh, writing about Bitcoin in a nonfiction way is almost like writing about the sunrise or writing about New York City. I mean, what is there anything left to say that hasn't been said already, right? So I just went to what I like doing, which is telling stories. So long answer to your question, Lauren, but that's why I wrote a fiction book.
Not a long answer, actually. Quite a good one. But yeah, I see my dad always having non-fiction books. And if I'm completely honest, I think that would bore me. I mean, I'm still 13, obviously, but I think it's good that there is a fiction book.
Mm.
And I think that maybe should be more. So
There's another one just behind them.
what's that?
The Cathedral by Bill Aronson. So there's another one coming.
All right.
You can read that one if you want. Although I've not read it yet. Okay. It just turned up the other day. Yeah. Tell me about it.
Laura, there is another reason, right? Which is there. So when I was asking myself, what can I do to contribute to Bitcoin, is the answer to me was, well, try to bring as many people into Bitcoin as possible, right? Because this movement, this revolution is only going to be successful with maximal adoption, right? If otherwise, it's just a bunch of us going to conferences and having a good time, for sure, but we haven't really succeeded if a vast majority of the world is not part of this revolution. And there are a couple of ways of bringing people in, right? One is explaining to them intellectually, hey, this is why this is important. Here's everything that's wrong with the current system today. Here's why this is better, right? You're appealing to their intellect. In my mind, a more scalable way, a way of reaching more people, is appealing to their emotion. And that's where storytelling comes in, right? If you look at any of the major religions in the world, God reveals himself through stories, right? They never try to prove God. They try to create this emotional appeal through myths and through stories. So it's just taking a leaf out of that book. Apart from the fact that I actually like telling stories, as I said, yeah, this is a good way. It's a human story that people can relate to, where there's a hero's journey, there's an arc for that character going through all of these different stages in his life, and in the process understanding Bitcoin. So it's in some way it's a sly roundabout way of trying to get people into Bitcoin is through stories.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's actually smart now you say that, because people only see the cover and see 24. So they won't know.
Why do you think it's called 24?
He explained it when we were in Madeira, I think, when it first launched. But I forgot. It was something to do with like him. I don't know. If I were to guess, it's him turning 24.
It's okay.
That was my guess.
Now, if it was called 21, what would be your guess?
Obviously, 21 million.
Okay, so 24 is still significant in the Bitcoin world, but it's not the character's age. It's not the date.
I don't have any other ideas.
Well, you're going to have to ask.
What does that mean?
Do you want me to tell it right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 24 seed words.
Okay. That should have been, yes, that should have been easy. Okay.
Well, the fact that it's not easy is interesting. And if you're not a Bitcoiner and you walk into a bookstore and you see that cover and it like the title is just two numbers, 24, I mean that people are going to find that interesting, right? Intriguing. and that's, I think, why Avi chose that kind of title.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Do you think you could guess what the storyline might be?
He explained it as the main character's dad passed away or like disappeared, and when he passed away, he left his 24 words all around some places. So the guy has to go on a treasure hunt to go around and find them all and collect his dad's Bitcoin.
All right. She just spoiled the book, listeners. But that is a good summary. Well done.
Yeah.
Avi, you should hire her as head of marketing
For sure. That was a good summary, Lauren.
Thank you. Okay.
Any further questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
Actually, I do have a question. What's the numbers on the book? There's numbers next to the doors. What do they mean?
So yes, the book cover has some cryptic numbers scribbled, a couple of them next to the door. So as Lauren said, it is a seed phrase, but the 24 words are not in order, right? So, and there's actually a real world bounty, or there was, with those 24 seed words, but not in the order in which they appear in the book. So those numbers scribbled on the cover are clues to unlocking the order. And someone was able to do that a few months back and claim the bounty.
So he actually put some Bitcoin on the blockchain with these 24 words attached to it and hid the 24 words in the story. And these numbers on the front here are cryptic clues of leading people where to find them. There's a whole bunch of treasure hunters out there. Like that's a crazy world. Those guys are incredible what they do. So somebody did actually find the correct 24 words, but then crack the code to put them in order, which is, you can't just guess that. You've got to then, like, there's layers to this. So, Avi, when was it broken and how much was scooped by the winner?
It was broken sometime in early April, and it was 17 million sats at the time, which is at that time, it was about 10 or 11,000 US dollars.
Wow. That's very generous of you.
Well, I will say when I put the sats in, they were not worth that much in US dollar terms. Or when I acquired those sats, they're from a while back. But yes, it ended up being a very generous bounty, and my wife still gives me a hard time about that.
Wow, that's amazing. But it did take. I remember following your tweets about it, and it was taking longer than I think most people were expecting. How long did it take for somebody to break that?
It was 6 months, about 5 or 6 months. Yeah.
Do you have any clue at all? Have they ever like come to you via DM or something and said, "Right, that was me. I cracked it"?
Yeah, it was a patent. It's all happened on Twitter. It's public. It's a patent lawyer who's actually, interestingly enough, following the Craig Wright trial very closely. He goes by a name on Twitter, Tufty Silvestris. He teamed up with a couple of professional brute forcers. So he actually didn't guess the order of all 24. I think he got something like 12. And then once they had 12 words in the right order, and then the other 12 scrambled, they could brute force it in a couple of hours.
Okay, now you're going to have to explain brute forcing, not just to Lauren, but maybe to many of the listeners.
Yeah.
Which is an important thing to know when you're safeguarding your own keys about brute forcing. So, yeah, can you please explain?
Sure. So, Lauren, let's say you have a phone, right? And your phone has a 4-digit passcode. Let's say the passcode is 1234. We'll just give an easy example here. Now, if someone's trying to break into your phone, and let's just imagine that your phone doesn't lock you out, it just allows infinite attempts to keep punching in different combinations. The person who's trying to break into your phone doesn't know your passcode is 1234. So what they do is they start with 0001. They try that, fails. Then they'll go to 0002, 0003, right? So just constantly trying different combinations. And then eventually, after 1,234 attempts, they'll get the right one. And so that process of constantly trying different combinations is called brute forcing. So this in a similar way, right? If you have 12 seed words, but you don't know what the right order is, you could try one order, see if it works. No, okay, then try a slightly different order. So keep trying. And it's millions and millions, so you need powerful computers to do this. With 24, there is no computer in the world that's powerful enough to solve all of those combinations. But with 12, as long as you know the words, you can find the order. So actually, this is a PSA to to plebs out there, right? If you have a 12-word seed phrase, you're safe. But if the words leak, even in the wrong order, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm. So you are shilling for a 24-word seed phrase.
Or 12, and just don't let anyone, don't let a single word slip out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's it for me.
All right.
All right. Well, have a good time, and I need to bring this chair back. Anyways, bye.
Thank you, Lauren. Bye.
Right, mate. So it's been good to see so much of you and your family over the last year, I suppose. Seeing you around all the different conferences. We saw you in Riga, we saw you in Oslo, we saw you in Prague. I feel like I'm missing another one somewhere.
Madeira, Warsaw.
Yes. Yes. We did see you in Oslo or no?
No, not Oslo. It was Warsaw.
Warsaw, I meant Warsaw, not Oslo.
Yeah.
The European Bitcoin halving party. How has that been, all of that travel over the last year?
Oh, it's been exhausting, mate. It's been great, but I'm actually taking a bit of a break, probably until Warsaw next year at this point. Because this year I've done 3 Europe trips. The year before was 3, and the year before that was 2, and that doesn't include the US trips, right? So yeah, I think I would say since I started traveling again after locking myself down after the pandemic, and I just came out of my shell in early 2022. By the way, I didn't lock myself down because I was scared of the virus. I just didn't want to be in that world of just hatred and nonsense that was going on. So I just removed myself from that. But since then, it's been over 20 conferences, about half in Europe and half in the States. So it's been a lot of travel, completely exhausted, incredibly rewarding. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, so it's and of course, our families got to spend time and get close. So that was great. Several other folks we got friendly with. But yeah, it's need to sort of hibernate for a little bit and actually try and build some stuff before I start traveling again.
Build what next? You've got the book out there. I mean, how long did that take? This is a big book, and I know
it is a
lot of effort.
Yes, 150,000 words, 400 and something odd pages. I actually started writing it in 2022, right after Bitcoin Miami that year. I came back and said, right, I'm doing this. Wrote the first 4 chapters and then just ran into writer's block that summer of 22. Wrote one more chapter. So this is all leading up to, there is a character who shows up in chapter 6, right? Like, I guess the key character in the book, to me anyway. I knew that character was coming. And as I was getting closer and closer to introduce, well, it's the Nonsmeister is the name of the character. As I was getting closer and closer to introducing the Nonsmeister, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. And then so I have fairly crippling writer's block all the way into spring of 2023, spring of last year. And then I said, right, that's it. I'm either writing this book or I'm not. So head down, was able to get myself to start writing around March, April of last year. And then by August, I was done with the remaining 18 chapters or so. So Yeah. So it was a good year and a half, including the writer's block.
What unlocked you?
So interestingly enough, I said, okay, first of all, I don't know if anyone's going to read this book. I don't know why I'm writing this. That was part of the whole the mental block I was in. At that point, I was, 3 or 4 months into Nosta by March of 23. And I said, let me just put up a chapter or two on Nosta and see how people react. And it was about 10 or 12 people. And the reaction was overwhelming. I said, this is incredible. I just want to know more. Please keep going. I said, oh, even though it was 12 people or whatever it was, might have been 20, who were commenting on. So every week I'd release a chapter and they'd be commenting on it and talking about it. I said, this is amazing. And so that that gave me the motivation to keep writing more. I said, okay, now they're waiting for the next chapter. I have to write one more chapter before the end of the week and get it out there.
Well, I know the artists liked it. Rebel, in particular, he shouted you out on the podcast that we did together. Fractal, as well, believe a big fan. Were any of them in your ear during the writing process?
No,
Right.
I became friends with a lot of them because of the book.
Huh.
I mean, I knew of Fractal, but I think it wasn't until before Madeira, I think, where he'd reached out to me and said, "Hey, Izzy, our friend, had recommended the book to him to Fractal, and Fractal read it, and then we started talking and became friends then." So no, none of it was. Yeah, it was no Bitcoiner was in my ear during the writing of the book.
That's cool, mate. That's cool. And
And
this sort of thing.
I will say, I think the reaction from the more artistic crowd has been far more um, positive, and I mean they've liked it a lot more than, let's say, the more analytical crowd, which is
Mhm.
interesting because I'm an engineer by
Mhm.
training, but I decided to write this sort of highly surrealist and metaphorical book because I do like that. And I think a lot of analytical minds, which is the vast majority of Bitcoiners, right, that we know who are focused on the technicals and whether it's at the protocol level or the macro stuff, I don't think they were particularly cared for the allegory and metaphor, with the poetic license I took to describe the time chain.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because your background is number crunching.
Yes.
Actually, why don't you tell the plebs what you do on a day to day? Because that is completely different to what have written down and made this project into.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started off as an electrical engineer. That's what I moved to the US. So originally from India, I moved to the US over 20 years ago to pursue studies in electrical engineering, worked in robotics for research for about 6 years. Then I met my wife and I said, okay, I need to settle down. A research salary is not going to cut it. So I studied finance, quantitative finance for a couple of years, got a job as a quant working on securitization at a startup, but we were servicing banks on US healthcare receivables, right? I was building valuation models and structuring these securitized vehicles for US healthcare claims. Did that for about 6 odd years. Uh, and then the company sort of flapped up due to corporate governance issues. I did my own thing. This is around 2015, 2016, where I started an advisory company where I was helping clean tech companies, right? Mostly in India, actually, structure their initial, repackage their power purchase agreements into some kind of debt instrument so that they could raise slightly more favorable financing for their plan. I mean, if I'd known about Bitcoin mining back then, it would have been a whole different story. But yeah, I was doing that, and I had stuff up on LinkedIn that I'm at securitization advisory, and a random guy reaches out to me on LinkedIn of all places in 2016, and I'd heard about Bitcoin and I'd heard about crypto. Actually, back when I was studying finance in 2010, we had a message board, and someone said, "Hey, there's this new thing called Bitcoin. is anyone interested? I was like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Forget about it. But anyway, so it had been at the back of my consciousness for a while. And then this random guy, complete shitcoin now, but he reaches out to me and says, I'm building an crypto exchange traded instrument to be launched either on the Bermudan exchange or the Gibraltar exchange. I can't remember now, but incredibly shady stuff. I mean, this is 2016, Wild West days, right? And I worked with him for a while, got into crypto because of that, and then got into blockchain, worked in quote unquote blockchain technology, and I mean, some of the stories actually mirrored in 24, like the
Yeah.
protagonist Oliver's arc of joining a blockchain Web3 company and initially believing in it, but then seeing that some of the horrible trade-offs they have to make, and then continuing to pretend like it's a game-changing technology. So I went through that whole arc, and at some point I said, could it be that the only use for a blockchain is peer-to-peer electronic cash and it's already been solved, right? It took me till 2019 to get to that realization. And then that was it. That's how I got into it. But I mean, this wasn't quite your question though, Daniel, but I guess, yes, this is my background. I'm a product guy. I'm a quantitative guy. Started off as a quant. Right now, I work at a large healthcare tech company. I mean, I've been in the healthcare space. Even the blockchain stuff I was doing was blockchain for healthcare. In fact, a lot of the nonsense talking points from 2017 and 2018 on blockchain and healthcare, if you see them floating around the internet, I probably authored many of those. I worked at the company that coined the phrase blockchain, not Bitcoin, for a while, for almost for over 2 years. So yeah, that was doing this kind of stuff, right? And now running a product team at a large health tech company. So it is odd that I've chosen to go in this completely literary direction with my book.
And you still have a foot firmly planted in both camps, right? You still have a fiat job and what you're doing in the Bitcoin and Nosta space at the same time. So how do you juggle that? There's a little bit of schizophrenia going on, surely.
Yeah, look, I mean, I treat this. It's more than schizophrenia, right? It's grappling with existential angst. I mean, you know how it is, Daniel. Once you're a Bitcoiner, it's just like you properly down the rabbit hole. Your whole perspective changes, right? So I work for one of the largest companies in the world, and I know that the work there is no meaning or purpose to the work I do. At best, it's going to increase their stock. If it's successful, my projects are successful, it's going to increase their stock price by a few basis points, or maybe even 1 or 2 whole points. Big deal, right? What contribution have I made to humanity by doing that? Absolutely nothing. I've just lined the pockets of some shareholders. So it's constantly dealing with that feeling of, look, I spend 8 hours of my day, half of my waking time, doing this nonsense that means absolutely nothing when there is so much I can be doing. But I treat it as a paycheck, right? It does. I mean, it allows me to travel to conferences. It allows me to stack sats, although I keep losing them, so I don't have any, obviously, as we all know.
Somebody stole they stole them from you after breaking the code. It's all gone. Yeah,
that was my boating. My book was my boating accident. Right, it's the bounty in the book. But yeah, so there's obviously a utilitarian element to it. To just having a salary, right, keeps the lights on, and it's not. I've been in jobs where the atmosphere has been much worse, much more unpleasant. This one, I run a team of about 30 odd people. They're nice people, right? And the work, I suppose, could be even more mind numbing than it is. So, small mercies there. So there are advantages, but given the choice, Daniel, I'd rather just be full time in the Bitcoin and Nosta world. I mean, freedom technology world, right? Obviously, Bitcoin's at the forefront of that, but I think I view Nosta as very, very complementary. And when you can ask, well, you do have a choice, right? I mean, I could quit today, but The thing to weigh is, well, who puts food on the table then, right? Who keeps the lights on?
Yeah. Oh, come on, hurry up and pump Bitcoin because
Yeah.
you and so many thousands of others could be freed from that. And
Yeah.
then this cultural side of Bitcoin, which we've been talking about, that's what we were talking about in Prague when we sat down with Uncle Rockstar. And
Yes.
after putting our heads together, because it suddenly dawned on us, I was part of a conversation with Rockstar, Nicolas Dorier, and Pavlenex from BTC Pay, with Mike Schmidt from Brink, and they were talking about the fund that funds devs and new devs coming into the space, and they get trained up, but then there's nowhere for them to go. And then they invariably end up going and finding whatever they can in this world, and that is a blockchain project or an NFT project or some kind of tokenization of some random project. Like, we lose them. And I mean, to me, that just seems to be a tragic misallocation of capital. And where else could it go? And that's where you and I started talking about like the cultural side, the cultural aspect of Bitcoin. Because you go to any conference, and I've been going to them like you the last 2 or 3 years, and every time you go, there are more books, and every time you go, there's more artwork, and every time you go, there's more games or things or whatever that is bringing in the cultural side or the sports aspect. You know what Peter's done.
Movies too. Sports, yeah.
Movies, of course. A big shout out for Warsaw. That's why we were there for the European Halving Party, but it was also the movie fest, the Bitcoin Film Fest. And I think we both came to the same conclusion. Well, we don't win without the culture. There has to be a culture shift. And are we as a community too focused on one aspect, like the number crunching side of things? Number go up, obviously. The analytical minds that you were talking about earlier, the devs, but obviously we can't have the culture if the development doesn't carry on. So, but there's something here, and you've got some further thoughts about it because you went away and you've thought a lot deeper on it than I have, because I've seen your texts and we've had further conversations, and you've even had further conversations with other people that are thinking along these lines. So, what's happened since our conversation in Prague, and let's get people up to speed on your thinking around this area.
Yeah, I mean, look, this goes back to what I mentioned to Lauren, right? What is the goal here? To me, it's we need to get as many people using Bitcoin. We need to get as many merchants onboarded onto Bitcoin for this revolution to actually bear fruit, right? The way we think it will. So that at a high level, right? This is not a technical architecture that I'm about to lay out. It's just a sort of high level framework. There's the protocol level work that needs to happen, right? That's both Bitcoin, Lightning, potentially Nosta as well, right? That's more ancillary, but so there's development work that needs to be funded there because that's what ensures that the foundation is strong, right? The decentralization, the integrity of the base layer, and all of that. So that clearly needs to be funded. Then on top of that protocol layer, there's the application layer, right? This is what allows people to access the benefits that the protocol brings. Applications are Bitcoin wallets, Nostra applications, LSPs, right? All the applications that users would use to, I guess, have the benefits that a strong monetary protocol and a payments protocol and a freedom technology protocol bring to them. Now, so you have those two, and I think those get reasonable attention. I mean, you could certainly get more attention from investment or from grants, right? But then, so you have the base, you have a mechanism for people to access the benefits, but then how do you bring the people in? And I think that's where culture comes in. Now, like I said, you could try to bring people in to use these applications by telling them, explaining to them on a very intellectual, analytical level, the benefits of the application, the issues with the old. And you will get some people, right, who can be convinced at that intellectual level. But my hypothesis, strong hypothesis on this is for this to truly scale into a global phenomenon, uh, we need to make that emotional appeal to bring people in, and that's where culture comes in, right? Culture is books, it's movies, it's art, it's music, right? I mean, we have some Bitcoin musicians, right? It's all of those that appeals to a much broader base, and then people come in because it's fun, right? They want to have fun, and then they say, wait a second, I'm listening to music on this my favorite artist on Wave Lake, and what is this lightning button here? Oh, I can send them some sats with a zap. What's a zap? What are sats, right? And that's how they get in. But they've not come in because they've been convinced intellectually. They've come in because they love listening to the music, or they love reading. They like the story that I wrote, right? Or they like Shooter's film about inflation, for instance. So I think that is the appeal of culture for me, and that's what I want to primarily focus on in the Bitcoin world. That's why I wrote the book. Uh, and the challenge is actually it's a challenge even for the better funded protocol development and the application development, which is uh, in shitcoins, right? In the crypto world, they can print money, right? They have foundations and they can pay people really handsome salaries and keep those developers at least until the project completely falls apart. Which is, they can. I mean, look at Ethereum; it's been going on for years, and they have consensus, right? This entity that plays this role. Solana has a foundation. They're taking a leaf out of the consensus playbook to drive adoption, and they've lasted, right, for 4 or 5 years. I mean, we all know that they're going to die eventually, but they've lasted that long because they have this pseudo money printer. In Bitcoin, if you're doing things the right way, I mean, there is no yield, right? There is no magic gains that happen overnight. So a lot of times you're depending on the generosity of patrons like Jack Dorsey, and there, I'm sure I'm just naming one. There are others as well who are taking that low time preference, almost generational view of saying, almost like the Medicis, right? The Medicis didn't look for uh, what is my 1 year return on investment on the Sistine Chapel? What is they didn't even look at the 5 or 10 year return on investment. But what is the 500-year return on investment? The culture has endured. It's priceless, right? You can't put a price tag on it. And their name, we say their name even now. So I think if the more people who are in a position to do so, obviously, to patronize these freedom technology tools, take the view of we're doing this for the culture. These are truly monuments to freedom, just like the Sistine Chapel is a monument to culture, right? Take that view and fund these projects, and that goes beyond just the protocol and application development. It extends into some of these cultural opportunities as well, right? Yes, we do want to set up some kind of nonprofit that helps these creators make their art, right? We want to commission an art piece. Okay, imagine like if someone commissioned. Um, I'm just going to throw an example out there, right? Let's say a patron came and said, 24 murals across the world, Bitcoin art. We'll hide a seed phrase in them, in each one of those 24 murals, but you have these giant murals in 24 locations across the world. And as people are driving by, they see this and it evokes something, and they want to find out more about it because it's this beautiful painting that's up there. And you can get hundreds of people, thousands of people interested and wanting to learn more about Bitcoin that way, right? And then they find out there's a treasure hunt, and then it becomes even more engaging, right? You can kickstart a tourism that way, right? Treasure hunters traveling from location to location. But this is the sort of thing that needs a patron who can set aside enough funds, knowing that they probably won't get an immediate meaningful return on investment, but someone has to talk to the city councils and ensure that, they have all the necessary paperwork to paint on some kind of public space. So that's just one example where a patron can step in. Movies, right? Would benefit greatly, especially stories that talk about freedom technology and draw people in. So I think just going back to what I said initially, which is in my conversations about growing the culture, I think the challenge here is finding people who are able to take that low time preference long term view and saying, I'm not going to treat this as just any other film investment or any other art investment. I'm thinking long term here. So that's, I guess, long way of saying well, Daniel, you're part of this. You and I have not started our Bitcoin for Culture Fund just yet because of these challenges.
This was one of the ideas that I love these ideas that you're sitting around the hotel lobby at the end of the long 3-day conference and you're just defragging, right? And because you've just had so much coming at you. All of the panels, all of the speakers, all of the presentations, all of the booths, all of the separate conversations you've had, all of the dinners, all of the people you've been exposed to, your mind is swimming. And we were sat down, Joe Nakamoto was there, Ricky and Laura, the Bitcoin explorers, were also there, just kicking ideas around. And this idea that you just threw out there, obviously in line with your book, commissioning an artist to do the 24 murals, well, it'd be even more incredible if that one person, if there was a patron that commissioned 24 artists in 24 different countries, or even 25 for the passphrase, but that's a cool idea. But if there was a fund, then the fund could do that kind of stuff, right? And that's what we were thinking about. We're like, where's the culture fund? Where is the fund? Where's the fund that can pick up the phone to Shooter, for example, and say, what do you need for final edit? Let's get your film in front of as many people as we can. Like, what do you need? Could be 20 grand, could be 30 grand. What does Pierre Corbin need to get his next movie over the line? Because there is so much. How many books are at the point of being finished, but the author just needs that little bit of extra support, needs the support to find the editor, needs the support to find the funds to publish. We are talking small ticket stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be millions or hundreds of thousands for a certain project. And that's kind of where we left it. And I know since then, since our discussion, we spoke with Dredd because OpenSats announced their education fund. Amazing to see. And I know now Plan B, you told me Plan B had either launched or planning to launch another education fund. So there's something going on. But we were much more specific on, no, this has to be culture. And a shout out to Bitcoin Racing, because I'm going to go along to Brands Hatch on Thursday and learn how to drive. And I'm going to spend £150 or whatever in sats to go and learn how to drive a car around the track. But they're driving Bitcoin adoption. Nice little pun there, guys. I love it. In their own way. But sport is culture. And you never know who you're going to inspire or who you're going to touch. But again, for them to keep a car on the road for a season, it's still not big money. You're talking like $20,000, $50,000, which a pleb community, we are just but plebs, trying to keep ourselves out of the fiat hamster wheel or escape it. We do need some kind of fund, I dare say centralized fund, but you know what I mean, that supports these cultural pushes, but then how do you decide? And, all of this,
I mean, you can open source the methodology, right? Like these are the criteria we're looking for in any, like if you're writing a book, it needs to be about Bitcoin. It has to be Bitcoin only. Can't be promoting shitcoins, right? Or you just have a handful of criteria and then just open source that saying, look, we made these decisions based on this one qualified, this one didn't, based on these criteria. I think there are ways around treating it like a complete black box where you and I, Daniel, let's say we're running this fund, we don't want to be judge, jury, and executioner, or certainly we don't want to be perceived that way, right? So I think there are creative ways in addressing the black box issue with a lot of this decision making. But I think the bigger challenge is getting enough people to recognize that this is necessary in the first place, right? And necessary enough for them, if they are in a position to do so, to be, I guess, for lack of a better term, the LPs or the patrons behind such a fund.
Yeah. Yeah, I think will be definitely some people listening to this are probably, nodding their head in agreement. Like because they've experienced the culture shift themselves. We all go through it. Once you spend X amount of time in the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you change as a person. There is no doubting that. And that's all linked to time preference, obviously. And I'm sure there's people out there that are going to have ideas actually after this. So please reach out to Avi or to myself just to throw some ideas around how we can get something up and running, decentralized, to get the funds into the creators' hands that need it to be able to get these projects over the line, so we can speed up Bitcoin adoption and through culture, not just through number go up and talking about the price of Bitcoin and I fear for the next 6 to 9 months the headlines in the newspapers, because we have all the ETFs now. Wall Street is fully in, 2 feet planted on the floor, and now we have options markets being rolled out as well. So there is going to be all kinds of noise in the Bitcoin space, so much noise, and the signal are the people, and the signal is the community, and the signal is the culture that is growing from anew, right?
Right.
We're redefining culture, redefining community in a
Yeah.
decentralized global manner.
I mean, number go up is happening, right? It's going to happen in the next. I mean, I think we're about to enter the sort of the exponential part of this bull cycle, pretty close to it. So that will definitely bring the curious people in, and along with them, the affinity scammers are going to be right behind. And I think it's critically important, if anyone cares about this revolution, to make sure that the affinity scammers are kept at bay. And that's not by censoring them; it's just by shining a much brighter light with our message than those guys can.
Oh God, the next wave of shitcoiners and infinity scammers. But we're so toxic, Harvey, for calling them out and telling them where to stick it. But it dawned on me the other day. A shitcoiner, he just wants you to buy his token, whereas a Bitcoiner just wants you to have a better life.
Yes.
But we're the toxic ones.
That is very true. Yeah.
All right, so fund. If anybody's got any ideas, reach out. And what's you texted me a few things that you wanted to touch on. That was one of them. The other one you wanted to touch on was a new Nosta for healthcare data company. So your mind is working at 1,000 miles an hour, Avi. So what's this?
I'm trying to. This is me. I don't want to position it as me trying to exit fiat, because that's not it, right? Me trying to enter the world I want to live in, which is doing the things I actually love doing. So on the one side, obviously, there's the culture stuff, I think, which is critically important. But I mean, I've spent the last 20 years in fiat healthcare, US fiat healthcare, which I would assert is probably the most fiat of health of entities or institutions that's out there. Just the misaligned incentives between private insurance companies and the large hospital systems, and then these data vendors that sit in the middle controlling the patient data. And this is especially acute in the US, but I think this is broadly applicable world over, right? And then because you're dealing with rising healthcare costs, mostly driven by waste because of the explosion in the number of middlemen and bureaucracy. And you have decreasing health outcomes. Obesity rates are up, right? People are just the satisfaction with the care they get is down. And a lot of that can be traced back, not all of it, but a lot of it can be traced back to patients not having sovereignty or autonomy over their own healthcare data. So if a patient has full control of their medical record, that's one. Also has full price transparency into the cost of care, right? Which does not exist in the US today, by the way, right? So if I'm a patient and I have private insurance, I can go, let's say I need an X-ray. I show up at the radiologist and they say, well, we looked at your insurance. It's a $20 copayment. Go get your X-ray. I say, okay, fine. It's only $20. That's great. I do it. 3 months later, I get a bill for $200 saying, oh, actually, your insurance denied it because of XYZ reason. So you're on the hook for the remainder $200. By the way, I'm dealing with something like that right now. My son, who's a soccer player, aspiring soccer player, has had uh, we had some X-rays on his knee, and we paid the co-payment, and then we got a bill for $1,000. So which I have no intention of paying. I'm going to dispute it, but the issue is health insurance companies incentive. Their business model really is to collect monthly premiums from patients and sit on those premiums. Because if they pay out the premiums as claims to hospitals, well, that's a loss for them, right? Now, by statute, they have to pay a certain percentage out. I think 70% of that out every year, right? It's just the way the law works in the US. But the way they game that is as soon as they get the premium, they park it in short-term treasuries and they collect the float on it and they delay paying and they delay paying and they delay paying. It's a completely broken incentive system. And then who's the one who's shafted in all of this? It's the patient, the person who needs the care, who's looking for care. So when they go in for care, they don't know how much it's going to cost. They think they're told something about a copayment, but that's never the real number. So there's no other market like this. It's where you're a consumer of a service. You go to a service provider, like for a haircut. So you go in for a haircut. It's a service you need. It's $30. Okay, done. And you walk out, right? You give them the cash. Transactions closed instantly. In healthcare, that's not the case because of this whole insurance dynamic. And a lot of the point being, a lot of this can be traced back to issues, first of all, data ownership from the patient's perspective, but also data portability across multiple health systems. Now, doctors can't publish rates because they don't know what the rates are. It's the insurance company who has this opaque rate controlling mechanism, and they get to decide. So there's an opportunity here with Nosta because the user identity, right, the NPUB, NSEC combination, the public-private key pair, lives at the protocol level. The patient can, if a patient spins up a Nosta identity, that's their identity, right? It's not controlled by the doctor's office. It's not controlled by the insurance company. It's not controlled by the data vendors, which is the case today, right? The user identity is trapped at the application level, and you can be rugged as a user by any of them. So if the patient controls their identity, they can also control their data because it's their health records and it can be encrypted to their private key, right? So only they can unlock it and then selectively disclose it to whichever doctor they need to. The other thing Nosta gives you is data portability, right? Because of the way Nosta events are set up, you can right now the issue with US healthcare is data because of the fragmentation. There are all these data silos. So patient data sitting in one system doesn't necessarily interoperate with another system. Nosta changes all of that. You get that full interoperability. And then you can also get this radical price transparency. Just imagine, right? You go, let's say your arm is hurting. You go to a website a portal, log in with Nosta, and you type in "my arm is hurting," and then you get a smart search back. It looks like you might need an X-ray. Here's a list of all the radiologists in your area, right? Then you can filter that by your web of trust, right? I mean, they all have reviews, 5-star reviews, but those reviews can be gamed by bots. But if there's a subset of your social graph that you trust, whose reviews you trust, you can filter that out by your web of trust, choose the care you need, you'll see the price, and then pay with Lightning. That it's done, right? You have your appointment scheduled, it's all paid for, no surprise bills. You show up, get your X-ray, and you're out of there. So and then disclose whatever data, your health history that's relevant to the X-ray to them, because you'll have this medical record app on your phone. You just send it to them. Done. So there's an opportunity here to rebuild the entire healthcare ecosystem on a truly interoperable network with Nosta, and just solve a lot of these data opaqueness issues, identity resolution issues. And so I'm launching a company with a couple of other folks. We're in the process of incorporating. It's going to be called Nos Fabrica, our factory in Latin, because really Nosta allows you to build an entire factory of applications that interoperate, and then you get the true network effect, right? Of different applications being able to talk to each other on an open protocol, and that just gives that flywheel a lot of momentum, brings new users in, existing Nosta users out of the box. If you're using Damus or Primal, you can use the healthcare app if you want, if you so choose, right? So I believe there's a huge opportunity here to disrupt the healthcare system and make it truly patient-centric, and reduce costs and ideally improve outcomes. Because if the patient's on the hook for paying for their care and they don't have this moral hazard of, oh yeah, the insurance is going to take care of it, which is a myth, right? Because you get these surprise bills all the time. But at the time of decision making, there is that moral hazard. You take that out of the picture, the patient's going to be very, I would think, would be careful about their health decisions to make sure that they're not on the hook for all of these costs. So yeah, in short, Nosta fixes healthcare, and I'm taking company live fairly soon.
Awesome, mate. Well done. And yeah, I didn't realize that you were this close to launching a new startup. That's amazing. And again, the more and more people I talk to about Nosta, it's inspiring them in so many different ways. You explaining how that works makes me think already to crowd health you have over in the US, right?
Yes.
So the need is
Oh yeah,
obvious.
and crowd health is perfectly complementary to our patient, right? So the patient could pay for care from their crowd health account, right? It doesn't have to be out of pocket, for instance. So yeah, so if anyone listening is an investor and is looking to join in our seed round, we're already getting a lot of interest. And and this is the first time I'm actually talking about this publicly like this, Daniel. But we floated this idea with a few people. There's already a lot of interest. So if you're an investor looking to get into our seed round, please reach out.
Mate, that's awesome. Right, okay. I'll send this audio on to people that I know that might be interested once it's dropped, to make sure that they listen. So then I think the last thing that we want to touch on is a new Bitcoin culture show.
Yes. So back to culture, Daniel. We sort of it's good. We're giving ourselves breaks. Culture, analytical stuff, culture.
Well, there's a huge health culture in Bitcoin, right?
Yes, there is. Yes.
I mean, we're constantly trying new diets and discussing new ideas, and exposing the food industry for what it is and how damaging it is to our health, and the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, goodness me. There was one loud group of people that were saying, please don't stick anything in your arm within, the years of 21 to 2023 and still now. So it does go hand in hand. So I can see why, these are overlapping. But what's the show going to be about? What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, by the way, I'd mentioned earlier, talking about sticking things in arms. That was the reason one of the other reasons I locked myself down for 2 years because I really couldn't go anywhere because I didn't want to stick things into my arm. Um, no, but coming back to the show, um, you know, I obviously have a podcast. It's a Nosta podcast, but obviously we cover a lot of Bitcoin in it, and it's audio only. But I did have another podcast which you were on, Daniel. It ran for about 8 or 9 episodes, it was called The Stories We Tell, and I was trying to bring this again, trying to play the culture angle and bring this talk about Bitcoin in the context of storytelling. But the reason I abandoned it and just chose to focus on my Nosta podcast is I think the Bitcoin podcast market, at least in the current form, is largely saturated. And there's some great conversations, right? I mean, your show is great. I mean, there's Rabbit Hole Recap. I'm actually not going to start listing them because I'll miss too many. But there's some amazing shows. But I think it's saturated because the format is Bitcoiners talking to Bitcoiners about Bitcoin on a Zoom split screen, and I think there's an opportunity here to do something different, right? Um, and that is to make it more interactive, more cultural. And actually had this idea. I remember talking to the Max DeMarco about this back in 2020, Prague in 2023. So not this year, but the year before. I said, hey, and I tried to enlist Max as my filmmaker, but I unfortunately couldn't afford him. He's a big shot. Um, but the idea is to have an Anthony Bourdain style travel show where it's about Bitcoin, but it's not really about Bitcoin, or rather, maybe the other way around. It doesn't seem like it's about Bitcoin, but insidiously it is about Bitcoin, which is you travel to different places, maybe Bitcoin communities in different places, over food, right? You talk to someone over, and you let's say they own a restaurant, and you have the slow motion, the cooking shots where food being prepared, and then you talking about their life, maybe it's an immigrant story, right? Over a meal, and it's just having that even more human conversation than you can on a Zoom call, right? Because you're right there and you're eating, and talking, right? So that style of show, Anthony Bourdain style show, obviously, there is only one Anthony Bourdain. I'm just giving that as the the North Star that I have. So do that kind of and well produced show, right? So I had that idea back in 2023, just because of stuff happening. My book and everything else went on the back burner. Decided to resuscitate that work. Talked to our friend Parker from BTC Pay, and he and I are going to. We were actually supposed to shoot this week, but because of scheduling, we had to bump it up by a month. We're going to do a pilot at a restaurant in Manhattan, which accepts Bitcoin actually. And it's an amazing immigrant story. So it's walking through Harlem and talking about how Harlem has changed over the last 20 years, and then talking about his immigrant story. And I have the script, everything ready to go. We just couldn't make the dates work this week. So we'll be filming that hopefully in a month or so.
Mhm.
And that's the pilot that's going to be out. And I hope that I can make. Obviously, it needs to be funded. So if it's compelling enough, right, it'll have the voiceover, and then the focus will be on the conversation and the food, obviously. But if I can get that funded, just make it a proper travel show. I mean, I've been dying to do that.
Well, okay. So, what kind of food is it in Manhattan? I'm already hungry.
It's this place we're going to film at next month is East African food.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So, question, uh, because you came to the US from India 20 years ago, I think you said. If the pilot goes well, what's the chances of episode one being you've flown back to India to where you grew up to interview, who knows, what do you remember about the food when you were growing up as a kid?
Oh, it was. I mean, the food was my favorite part of growing up in India. It's the kebabs. I mean, don't get me started on the food.
So where would you choose?
I would
Where would
choose
you?
my so my hometown. It's a town called Hyderabad, or city actually. It's a fairly large one. Become a bit of a tech hub these days, but the food culture has still persisted. I would certainly go back there and into the old town,
Mhm.
right, where people cook on these clay pots with over coal and just make these incredible. Hyderabad is an interesting place because it was an amazing collision of two cultures. You have the South Indian Hindu culture, and then you had the Muslim culture, which had brought in the meat, the grilled meats, and the South Indian culture of spices. And you just get, I would say, the best grilled meat in the world, right? Just because of the flavor profile, the spices, and um, so yeah, I would certainly go there to the old town and to one of those proper places where they grill meat the old fashioned way.
So
Oh,
we're
and hopefully
talking.
with a Bitcoiner.
Yeah, that this sounds. I'm already salivating. We're talking about like the meat in kind of a dry rub, cooked within the clay oven, the tandoor, and
Yes.
the breads that they just slap on the inside of the.
Yes.
Oh,
Bread that doesn't make you fat, interestingly enough. Well,
right.
if you in
Why is
moderation.
that?
Why is that? Yeah. That's a whole different rabbit hole, Daniel.
Real ingredients.
Real ingredients. Yeah.
Man, well, that's a cooking show I want to actually be a part of. So if that's going to be episode one, we're flying out to India. We want to come and follow you around the old town of Hyderabad and eat the best food that we can find from, the old mamas that are probably still there serving the same food in the same style that they were taught
Yeah.
by their grandmothers.
I would. Let's do it, man. Another idea. Another idea we need to find a patron for, but we'll do it.
Yeah. Well, Bitcoin moons, perhaps we'll just do family trips and
That's
just,
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
just document it. All right, mate.
Yeah,
Well,
but more realistically, though, real quick, Daniel, before we wrap, more realistically, I think I'll stick to the New York area for the pilot. Maybe you try and do a couple more in the New York or Northeast
hmm.
US area, and then see where it goes.
Yeah. No, it's a good idea. And I love it. And there's a book coming out, right? Were you part of that? There's I can't remember what's it called? Bitcoin Kitchen, maybe? I can't remember. Oh, I don't want to shill it and spoil it. But X amount of Bitcoiners, say there's 20 Bitcoiners, have all put in a recipe that they love cooking from home, and a cookbook is being made. So it's going to be coffee table style cookbook with all Bitcoiners recipes and from around the
Oh,
world.
love it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one to drop. So again, culture. That was a culture project. There's
Yes.
plenty more out there, I'm sure. All right, last one, mate. If you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
I actually should. I've heard your show enough to know to have prepared for this question, but I didn't. But I think I'll go with a boring answer here, sadly, Daniel, which is I would give it to someone who is a node, metaphorically speaking, right, with a large reach, right. So Cristiano Ronaldo. Oh, there you go. I'll give it to Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, he's shitcoining right now, but
Mm.
long time Madrid fan. Respect the guy. Respect him as a footballer and actually as a human being too, right? I think he lives a good life. Now get him off the shitcoin train. Get him orange pilled. What is he? He's recently crossed the record for the most number of followers on social media, right? I think.
Okay.
Yeah, on all of like over a billion user followers. So yeah, he'd be a perfect guy to go orange pill.
Uh, there are plans. It's been tried because he's from Madeira, right?
Yes, yes.
Madeira is a small place, and Free Madeira and Andre in the work that they're doing there is gaining a lot of influence there. And they are, yeah, one day, fingers crossed. Let's just say,
Fingers crossed. We had Andre on the show last week, actually, on my show last week,
right?
and we floated this idea as
Yeah,
well. And he
great.
was a bit cagey about it, but we'll see.
Well, a request to the plebs. If everybody, once you listen to this, as you're falling asleep tonight, please can you manifest in the direction of of Ronaldo and getting in touch with Andre at Free Madeira to learn more about Bitcoin and the incredible impact it's actually having on the island there, because there's over 300 merchants now accepting Bitcoin on the island of Madeira. And this is a small island. And if you weren't at the conference this year, excuse me, back in March, for the listeners, sucks to be you, but they're not going to do another one for 4 years. So put it on your diaries. March 2028, there's going to be another great conference in Madeira. And I can't imagine what that place is going to look like by then. If there's already this level of adoption, we just need more people going and visiting and spending their sats and supporting the community. And they've got Gigi and Pablo over there running the sovereign engineering cohort. And I think the next one of that drops middle of October. And I think, did Andre tell you how many they've got coming this time?
But the SEC, no, I don't think he went into numbers.
I think it was 40 plus. I can't remember.
40 plus, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and they're also building this giant co-working area, right?
That's going to be a Bitcoin park or something along those lines. Bitcoin Commons. There'll be which is the kind of Meshtadel idea as well. It's like, okay, so if you're a Bitcoiner, where can you go and just plug straight into the community? And that's what Orange Pill app is also part of doing. Connecting people all around the world. So lots of great projects going on, and culture again. It always goes to that. That's the cornerstone here. So Avi, thanks. Where can people reach out if they want to learn more about you or listen to something here that they feel they can add value to you?
Yeah, so I would say three things. If you want to read my book, the easiest way is go to Amazon.com or Amazon whatever your top level domain is, and type in 24 Avi Burra. You'll find my book. You can find me on Nosta. I'm not particularly active on X, so it's no point. So on Nosta, primal.net/Avi, AVI. And then listen to my podcast, Pleb Chain Radio. You can find that on Fountain.
Cool. Excellent. So your book's not on bitcoinbook.shop?
It's not, no.
Okay. We got to get you and Nico in touch so they can host that for you, because KONSENSUS Network, they host all the authors and try and get as many Bitcoin books translated as well. So I can make that introduction for you, and hopefully you guys can get together.
All right. Sounds good, mate.
All right, brother. Thank you for coming on. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. Cheers.